Now let's go to Revelation 9 and verse 5. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. Now here's an interesting detail. Scorpions rarely kill human beings when they sting them. But they do cause excruciating pain by the poison. Swelling, suffering, even to the point of people wanting to die. Applying the year-day principle, the 5 months would be equivalent to 150 years. Notably, the age of reason, have you heard of the age of reason? Or the Enlightenment? Began in the early 17th century with the work of an individual called René Descartes. What country was René Descartes from? France, that's right. A contemporary of his, Blaise Pascal, wrote the following about René Descartes, the rationalist. I cannot forgive Descartes. In all his philosophy, he did his best to dispense with God. Is that atheism? But he could not avoid making him set the world in motion with a flip of his thumb. After that, he had no more use for God, or for miracles, or for anything supernatural. Descartes' most famous book was called A Discourse on Method, published in 1637, some 150 years before the beginning of the French Revolution. The age of reason jettisoned the need for faith and the miraculous in religion. It supplanted faith in God with faith in human wisdom. During this period, the sciences would come to believe that all could be resolved through human ingenuity without the need of an ever-interfering God. Notably, these philosophies would not kill people, but they would make them what? Existentially miserable. The age of reason inspired the French Revolution. Now let's go to the next verse, which is connected with the concept of verse 5. In those days, men will seek what? Death, and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. Is that what happens with a person who doesn't believe in God, someone who has no hope for the future, no reason to live? Absolutely. Notice this statement from Ellen White that I read before. I think I read it this morning. Atheism can shed no ray of light into where? Into the grave. It cannot restrain crime or quicken the moral energies. It has no power to elevate the character or purify the soul. On the contrary, it always tends to degenerate the human race. Is that what happened in France? Yes. It leads away from purity and peace. An instance of this is given in the history of the French Revolution. Now, she's going to apply this to the French Revolution. That period when the existence of God was denied and His commandments were abolished was the most revolting that is recorded on the pages of human history. The main characteristic of contemporary society is meaninglessness. Do you know that suicide has greatly increased in recent years? Why? Because life has no meaning for people. This is why people are hungering and thirsting for what? For spirituality. But they're looking for it in the wrong places. That's right. They're looking for a reason to live. The rise of philosophies such as deism, ethical relativism, nihilism, rationalism, existentialism, evolutionism, and atheistic communism has led people to be pessimistic about the meaning of life. After all, if there is no supernatural divine beginning, what hope is there for a supernatural divine end? If there is no creator God, there is no future. And if there's no future, then life has no ultimate meaning. This is the reason why the psalmist says that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Are you catching the picture? People wanting to die. The scorpions sting. They cause excruciating pain and suffering, spiritually speaking. Now notice this statement from Ellen White. I think this TDG is Today with God, 339. There are many ways in which human beings can crucify the Son of God afresh and put him to open shame. The worship of worldly business so confuses the mind that Satan stealthily approaches and insidiously gains entrance. He has many theories by which to lead astray those who will be led. The erroneous views of God that the world is entertaining are skepticism in disguise, preparing the way for what? For atheism. By hasty words and selfish deeds, men often grieve the heart of Christ. Thus, Satan works untiringly to lead them to disloyalty. As he gains control of minds, he makes upon them lasting impressions, and the realities of eternity fade away. The book of Ecclesiastes is a good illustration of the spirit that inspired the French Revolution. Have you ever read Ecclesiastes? Do you know that that's one of the last books that the Jews included in the canon of Scripture? There were 3 books that were included last by the Jews in the Old Testament. One was Song of Solomon. It was too graphic in referring to sensual love. The second book, which took a long time to include, was Esther, because the name of God is not mentioned. And the third book is Ecclesiastes, because this appears to be an extremely pessimistic book. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. You know, you read the book, it's depressing. The question is, why is this book included in Scripture? Because Solomon is describing his life when he went astray from God. The important thing is not the pessimism of the book, but how he ends the book. The end of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man, for God will bring every work into judgment. And then he counseled the youth. He says, remember thou thy Creator in the days of their youth, before the evil days come, and you look back and you say, I have no joy in them. He's describing his life separated from God. And do you know that Solomon, Ellen White even said that he toyed with the idea of atheism, of becoming an atheist? Notice what we find at the top of page 177. Ecclesiastes 2:17 and 18, and I'm reading from the New International Version, which I think is more vivid. Solomon says, so I hated what? Did he want to die? Yes. Was he suffering? In fact, Ellen White said that he became effeminate. What does effeminate mean? He became woman-like. Now, that's not a bad thing, unless you're a man. It's good for women to be effeminate. It's not good for men. So he says, so I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is what? Meaninglessness and chasing after the wind. Have you ever tried to grab the wind? And then in verse 18 he says, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. That is the life of the atheist. The life of the person who has gone astray from God. That is the spirit of this French Revolution. Ellen White wrote in Prophets and Kings, page 58, about Solomon. His faith in the living God was supplanted by atheistic doubts. Unbelief marred his what? His happiness. Weakened his principles and degraded his life. Does that sound like what happened to the people who participated in the French Revolution? Absolutely.